She was a queen, and then she vanished. No rebellion, no execution, no dramatic downfall in front of a crowd. Just silence. Behind the thick stone walls of a forgotten palace wing, a woman once cloaked in royal robes stared through iron bars as decades passed outside her window. Her name once echoed through courtrooms and royal banquets, spoken with awe, envy, and sometimes fear. But now, it's barely a footnote, erased from memory, like dust swept quietly under the throne. Imagine spending 38 years in a single room, not for something you did, but for what you represented. Power, influence, a threat. She wasn't overthrown because she failed her people. She was hidden away because she made the wrong people nervous. Her existence disrupted a fragile balance built on fear and ambition, and so they locked her away. But the question remains, who exactly was she? What made her so dangerous that history had to forget her? And who gained from her silence? The answers are buried in a story that was never meant to be told, until now. Her name was Joanna of Castile, born into a world where crowns were passed through blood and battles, but rarely ever to a woman. The daughter of Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, she was royalty from the moment she took her first breath, and yet no one expected her to matter. She was the third child, meant to support the dynasty from the sidelines, not stand at its center. But fate, as it often does with history's most haunting figures, had other plans. When her elder siblings died, one after the other, Joanna became the unexpected heir to one of Europe's most powerful thrones. But it wasn't just blood that propelled her forward, it was her mind. Fluent in multiple languages, fiercely intelligent, and surprisingly opinionated for a woman of her time, Joanna refused to be ornamental. She sat in on councils, questioned decisions, and learned to read the room the way a warrior reads the battlefield. She wasn't loud, but she didn't need to be. Her presence was enough to shift the energy around her. In court, they called her La Loca, the mad one, but madness, in the language of power, is often just another name for a woman who won't bend. She wasn't mad, she was inconvenient, strategic, capable of holding a kingdom together or pulling it apart. And in a world built by kings who feared losing their grip, that made her dangerous. Power, as always, comes with a price. Hers was just beginning. The betrayal didn't come from distant enemies or foreign invaders. It came from within her own blood. Joanna had barely settled into her role when her husband, Philip the Handsome, began to circle power like a hawk, charismatic and politically ambitious. Philip didn't just want influence, he wanted total control. He courted the nobles behind her back, undermined her authority in court, and began spreading whispers that she was mentally unfit to rule, not because she was, but because it was convenient. A queen who questions decisions is dangerous. A queen labeled mad, easily ignored. Even after Philip's sudden death, a death that itself sparked rumors of poisoning, Joanna wasn't restored to power. Instead, her own father, Ferdinand, saw an opportunity. Under the guise of protecting the realm, he declared her incapable of ruling and assumed control himself. She wasn't consulted, she wasn't heard, she was silenced. And in the silence, plots thrived. One cold night in 1509, under heavy guard and without a trial, Joanna was taken to the convent of Tordesillas. No royal carriage, no dignity, no explanation. Just a door slammed shut behind her and the sound of keys turning in iron locks. The queen, once the legal heir to Spain's greatest thrones, was now a prisoner. Her guards were instructed not to speak to her. Her windows were barred, her letters censored. The kingdom moved on, pretending she had never existed. Some say it was about preserving order. Others believe it was personal, that her independence, her intellect, her refusal to be manipulated had made her intolerable. But the result was the same. A powerful woman buried alive in her own palace, and the worst betrayal. It wasn't that they locked her away. It was that they convinced the world she deserved it. The room was small, too small for a queen, and far too small for a mind that once held an empire. Its walls, thick and unyielding, held back more than just the cold. They trapped her thoughts, her voice, and eventually, her name. A single barred window let in slivers of light, enough to mark the passage of day into night, year into decade. The stone floor was worn by her pacing, a silent rhythm to a life without meaning. There was no court, no audience, no reason to dress in finery. Her crown had long since turned to dust in the minds of those outside. The convent's walls echoed with prayers, but for Joanna, silence became both enemy and companion. Her only regular visitor was her jailer, tasked with recording her behavior and restricting her communication. Letters were intercepted. Servants were instructed not to speak unless necessary. Even her children were kept away, their visits rare and strained, orchestrated more as political gestures than family reunions. The people she had given everything to, her father, her advisors, her own son, never looked her in the eye again. Days bled into each other. Some say she refused to eat for long periods. Others say she clung to rituals, prayers at dawn, pacing by moonlight, murmuring to portraits of loved ones long gone. One account suggests she kept her husband's casket beside her, convinced he would return. Whether truth or rumor, it doesn't matter. The real tragedy wasn't how she behaved. It was how little anyone cared to ask why. Imagine hearing the bells of the town every morning, the laughter of children beyond the walls, and knowing the world had moved on without you. She wasn't dead, but for 38 years, she lived as if she had been, a monarch stripped of her kingdom, her voice, and slowly, herself. Outside her narrow window, the world transformed in ways she would never witness. Kingdoms rose and crumbled, alliances shifted like tides, and her own children, those born of her blood, claimed thrones and made treaties in her name. Her son Charles became the Holy Roman Emperor, ruling over lands she had once been destined to lead. His signature appeared on edicts, his armies marched through Europe, and his image adorned coins across continents. And yet, the woman who had given him the crown lived forgotten, tucked behind stone and silence, as if she were nothing more than a relic of a fading past. The contrast was unbearable. While he sat in gilded halls, she sat alone in the dark. While the world debated the Protestant Reformation and maps of Europe were redrawn, she remained unchanged, a candle burning in a sealed room, her light slowly devouring the last of its own wax. Even the walls around her aged more than she did. Trapped in time, she missed not just events, but life itself. No music, no new faces, no chance to grow old surrounded by memory and meaning. The world evolved, and in doing so, it erased her. She was not just ignored, she was overwritten. She was never truly released. Joanna died in that same stone convent in 1555, after nearly 4 decades of confinement. By then, the world had long ceased to wonder if she was still alive. Even her own son, Emperor Charles V, rarely spoke her name in public. When she passed, there was no grand procession, no royal mourning that matched the dignity of her title. She was buried as a monarch, yes, but more out of obligation than honor. The world moved quietly past her grave, as if unsure of how to remember someone it had spent so long trying to forget. And yet, her absence lingered. There was something tragic in how thoroughly she had been erased. No grand portraits remained to mark her legacy. No streets bore her name. Her story lived on only in fragments. Court records, gossip, and conflicting reports written by men who never spoke to her. She became a cautionary tale, a whisper, a symbol of what happens when a queen becomes a ghost in her own kingdom. There is no justice in how she was remembered, only echoes. And maybe that's the real tragedy. Not that she died alone, but that she lived unseen. A monarch in name, forgotten in spirit. Her window may have been sealed with iron, but the idea behind it is still alive today. We still silence women who speak too boldly, question too much, or refuse to shrink. We call them difficult, unstable, dramatic, anything but powerful. Joanna's story didn't end when she died. It continues in the boardrooms, parliaments, and headlines where women are still told to be seen and not heard. Her prison was built of stone, but ours are quieter. Expectation, dismissal, erasure. And yet, remembering her is an act of defiance. To speak her name is to reclaim what history tried to bury, not just for her, but for every voice pushed into silence. The queen behind the barred window, her robe gathering dust, was never mad. She was inconvenient. And if her story teaches us anything, it's this. Silence is not the absence of strength. It's often where strength waits, watching, remembering, refusing to be forgotten.